Hey, this is Steve from Drift America RC, and I'm doing a Sanwa install, and I know a lot of people have been having some problems getting some of the stuff programmed, so I wanted to make a video showing exactly, how to do everything, and I'm going to be breaking it up into these parts, solder the speed control, download the files for the multi-setting gear, program the servo using the multi-setting gear, and then program the gyro using the multi-setting gear. And then we're going to have to program the speed control using the program box, and then I'm going to set up code 10 on the M17 radio. Hopefully you guys already pretty much know what all of these items are. I'm going with the Fleeta drift spec motor. Fleeta is a pretty high-end motor, and I'm using the Sanwa servo horn. This stuff can be programmed without the multi-setting gear using code 10, but really difficult to do. I would advise against it. The multi-setting gear, that's going to be a really important part to setting your servo and gyro up. So I would just go ahead and pick one up if you haven't yet. But I'm going to start with the speed control and the motor, and I'm going to solder those up and talk just a little bit about how to do that. The other thing, I have this paper that I'm going to be using throughout, and I'm going to mark what part of it I'm on for the video. So right now I'm going to solder the ESC. I'm just going to do it like that and start like that. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about soldering too, because soldering seems like something that should be obvious. You melt two things together. Simple, right? But there's some things that can help if you understand a little bit more about it. So I'm going to try to mention those things. Where did cutters go? So first thing I'm going to do is cut the battery cable, and usually I try to keep the battery cable a little bit on the short side, just because usually people's actual battery cables are usually pretty long. So this one doesn't need to be terribly long. I always cut just enough off to get solder on it, so that you actually have more plastic to use as a insulation. So I cut just the ends off, and so that'll be the side that goes to the battery, and this will be the side that goes to the ESC. When you solder, you really want to pre-tin both sides before you actually put the solder on. So if you have some kind of tool to hold the wire in place while it's setting up, it's good to use. But if you use something metal, it'll keep the surface from getting hot. So I think this one's made of some kind of, it says Radio Shack on it. That's great. Okay, it shows how old I am. I'm not sure what material this is made out of, but I'm pretty sure it's something that doesn't conduct heat. That's really what's important, because if it conducts heat, it actually absorbs the heat. You want, oh, and I use this kind of overkill soldering iron. It's pretty, actually, completely soft. They're completely cold when you touch it, but then you pull the trigger and heats up super fast. So, and it gets really hot. So I prefer to use that. I'm just gonna go in here and tin all my spots. Now, if you, well, that wasn't a good example, but if you watch this, you want it to where the solder gets hot when it actually touches the metal, and you want it to soak into the metal. Let's see how it did that right there. It almost sticks to the metal everywhere once the metal gets hot enough to take the solder. I didn't explain what I was putting on here. This is flux. I'm sure some people already know how to solder. Most of you guys probably do, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. This stuff, you can put it on everything. I'll show you actually. This is a wire with flux on it. And you can see I'm going to actually apply the solder to the wire. You can see how much faster it heats up. And then this is without flux. We'll apply the solder to the wire. It's just a badass done. Well, you can see it didn't go all the way through, and on this one it went clean through. So it's definitely always better to use flux on all your surfaces before you start soldering. So these are going to be the two battery wires. You also have a capacitor in here. Keep that in view. So this capacitor, I don't know if they use really high temp solder or what, but I always cut their solder off because it seems like it doesn't melt. So just cut theirs off and give yourself a little lead and flux. Pretty tin. So now you're just melting the two solder spots together. So the way I do this is I put these laying flat. And then when you go to put the wire on, it actually holds the capacitor in place. If your soldering iron is not getting hot enough, get a different one, or maybe sand down the tip on it. Make sure everything's tight, the screw's tight on it. Working with a soldering iron that doesn't get hot enough sucks. Really hard to do. So I'm going to make the motor wires here. And the chassis that this is going on, I don't know what the exact length is. So I'm just going to make these motor wires kind of long. tips off and pre-tin them all. Sharpen wire cutters. Some flux on there. This stuff is kind of gooey. Are there paper towels in here? Oh yeah. Right next to me. Okay. Alright, so we're gonna pre-tin. I do this same kind of thing when I'm gluing something. I put glue on the surface and then I put glue on the item that you're applying to the surface, and then you smash the glue together. And that way the glue, when it's fresh out of the tube, is at its wettest. You don't want the surface of the glue to dry while you're waiting to apply the item, and then you're basically, unless you mix up the glue again once you apply the item, which you can do, but it's just better to apply it fresh out of the tube on both sides and then smash them together. You can see it soaking into the wire. See, as I'm heating this up, it starts to soak into the wire on its own. That's really what you want. What, putting this sunroof on? Show you another video of it close up. As the wire heats up, the solder actually soaks into it. One more solder on there. What's up?
Plunger snapped.
It broke?
Yeah.
That's not good. Alright, so the motor wires are ready to go on here. We're going to start with wire A. And now you got tin on both sides, so all you need to do is heat them up until they both melt. And you feel it kind of seed into the post. Just take the heat off of it. seating it because I like it to be as straight up and down as possible. Sometimes it's really close in there and you can actually get in there with a hobby knife and trim it down. But I'm gonna move it just a little bit more. Yeah, hobby knife. What I was saying about getting in here and kind of trimming this down, you can just kind of like floss it. Just a little space. Make sure you're not too close. And that little extra booger cuts right off. No problem. But yeah, you want to make sure there's no contact. Most people don't insulate these. I just try to stand them straight up and down as much as I can. So there you go, straight up and down clearance. Now one thing I have to do is get a plug for the battery. I didn't grab that before I sat down, so I'm going to pause the video for just a second. Okay, got my beans plug. These things are a little weird because if you get them too hot for too long, they'll melt. So you got to be careful not to do that. And get my heat shrink tube. Don't forget to use that. Actually, since I haven't soldered the other side on yet, it's not urgent to put it on just yet. On that one. Alright. Isolate these. Actually took this Dean's plug off of another ESC, so it's already tinned. Make it a little better. You can see it soaks into the metal just like on the wires. It soaks right in. And you just need to apply it. Honestly, this is kind of tricky to do. If you can do it without having something holding it, then you're pretty good. Well, technically that would be okay. No. Flatten it down a little bit. And let that one cool off a little. Made out of things that most people have handy. A rubber band works, but I don't have a rubber band handy, so we're gonna do it the easy way. Well, I say easy, watch me have a hard time now. Actually, the easy way is to hold it in the vise, which I have right here. But most people don't have a vise handy. I'll try to do it this way. I know. Harvin brings one sometimes. You know what it is? These are my pliers that don't have teeth on them. These ones are mine. These are pliers with the teeth on them. There we go.
Where the little metal ones at? There you are, there up top.
Hmm?
I just do another coat. I don't know why it's doing it. That smoke was like at the end of the can, and it came out like shit.
I would just paint it black.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Okay. Round 10. Dean's plug 1, Steve 0. Alright. Pretty solid, nothing melted. Where did my, okay. Now I'm gonna put these on here. Usually people use a cigarette lighter, which works just fine. I have a fancy heat gun machine thing that I'm gonna use. That guy right there. And actually Warren was just using it to dry something. So I'm gonna crank up the heat to like 180, keep the fan down, and put the heat shrink in place. Oops. Same one twice. So now all we have to do is put the battery cable onto the speed control. Dean's, and I swear I've actually hooked this up backwards once and ever since then, every single time I check it to make sure. Do you have a battery plug handy? Something that says red and white. Sorry. So the red is the one that goes sideways. I mean, I guess depending on where you're looking at, they both go sideways, but to me that's sideways. And then the negative goes straight up and down. So just remember to always put the one that's sideways on, or just check every time, like I do, so you don't burn up your speed control. That sucks. All right. So red sideways. Oh, and also, so like say you're just positioning your speed control here, and your battery needs to go this way. So you can make this cable shorter so that it actually makes the cable bend sideways. But since I'm not sure about his battery position, I'm just gonna go ahead and hook it up straight up and down. There we go. I think I'm gonna, and you can do this after the fact too, but I think I'm gonna have the motor wires going the opposite way, so I'm gonna put them on the other side.
What's how big coming? I thought he'd be here by now.
He said 5. I think that looks pretty good. All that's left now is the motor. And we've got the Fleeta, the much more racing Fleeta drift spec here. And I'm actually going to use this to hold it while I'm soldering it. We are A, B, C. Same thing, we're going to tin the wires, we're going to put flux. Flux is weird. Alright. So I'm gonna wait till the surface gets hot enough for the solder to make sure that it's going on good. Yeah, it soaks into it. Alright, then we're going to connect the A to the A side. So, right this way, so A. melt into each other. And then the B wire. Anybody's browsing through the video, they want to see what part I'm on, you can see where we are. And see. So now the only thing you need to hook up is the sensor wire. Ooh, they give you a little one there. Alright, that'll be your sensor wire. Oh yeah, the Sanwa, the speed control comes with a sensor wire. Oh, we do need to put the fan in, and I'm going to do that real quick. Fan has these little it has a holder for the capacitor, which actually is pretty functional because the capacitor won't be dangling around and have the wire break off on it, and then something happens because you didn't have the capacitor hooked up. So maybe I better put this here. So these little pieces go inward. First. How many times do you do that?
You have some quick set glue, Steve?
Super glue?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's over there. I don't know what condition it's in. It seems like everybody uses it. It's all goopy on top now. I don't really like that stuff, honestly. Not unless you're doing tires, but on a body, man, it'll fog up your body and get all crusty and like it.
No, I was just trying to redo my little rearview mirror I knocked off.
Yeah, it's gonna cloud up your windshield if you do that. I would definitely not do that. I guess So it's safe to put that wire in there. I'd say probably better leave that slack on the wire. You know, it seems like they give you just enough to wrap around, huh? I'll leave it. Let you guys make that call. Alright. Looks pretty good. We're ready. We need this bad boy. There are obviously little tabs that you need to make sure that you don't put it in backwards. You only let it in one way. So. Alright, so we've got the ESC plug for the receiver, on off switch, plug for the battery, motor, everything's all set up. So I'm going to stop the video and make sure we just did solder the ESC. So the next step will be download files to multi-setting gear. And I am going to do that on the next part to get us out of this messy area and back over to the nice clean area where we have all of the steps laid out that we're going through. Now we have the ESC soldered and we're ready to move along to download files to multi-setting gear. I'm gonna end the video and we'll come back and do the rest on the next one. Thank you guys for watching.